World War I is one of the most infamous and terrible conflicts that was ever inflicted upon the world and mankind. It is estimated that almost 40 million people died in the conflict, and the power structure of the world changed forever. It is probably the most defining moment of the 20th century, yet media today rarely tackles it in any form, whether it be video games or movies. But why is that? What makes World War I games unable to truly work? Which is a bit weird because its successor, World War II, is probably the most gamified war ever. But unlike the flashy, action-packed battles of World War II, World War I was more defined by misery, stalemates, and an ultimate sense of futility about the whole conflict. How do you make that engaging to players who expect adrenaline-fueled excitement and heroism and grand set pieces to live out their fantasies in? And why do even the best attempts like Battlefield 1 struggle to fully capture the reality of what World War I was like? If you're still listening, please do like and subscribe. I would appreciate it a lot. But now let's break down farther what actually makes World War I so different from other words and hard to gamify compared to other more popular wars. So the first obvious piece is trench warfare, which World War I is famous for. So to sort of set the scene a little bit here, the Germans attempted the Schlieffen Plan, which entailed attacking Belgium, a neutral country, to get to France, bypassing the French provinces in Alsace-Lorraine, which is the area of France which borders Germany. The Germans planned to end the war quickly by taking Paris, and the plan seemed to be working for the first few months of the war till supply lines got overextended and the French army started to counterattack. At the peak of German advances, they were only 25 miles or 40 kilometers away from Paris. But as they got pushed back, both sides started to dig in and make massive trench networks. Now, trenches, as established, are one of the most well-known parts of World War I, and they are not conducive to a fun and exciting gaming experience, at least as most players know it. Trench warfare was terrifying, and dirty troops would stay in a trench overrun by rats and lice while being shelled and sniped out all day while food got scarcer and scarcer. Life in a trench was tedious and mind-numbing. Most gamers do not want to play a game where you are stuck in a trench with a random chance of dying at any time and you can't do anything about it, and then when you do attack, you are easily cut down by machine guns and artillery as you attempt to cross no man's land without dying. I think the second reason it's hard to gamify is the lack of clear morality. Now, the war did happen over 100 years ago. I'm not going to make judgment calls, but it's very hard to point to the, quote, moral side in the war, the good side, if you will. So on one hand, you had the Central Powers made up of Austria-Hungary, Germany, the Ottoman Empire, and Bulgaria was there too, but they don't really count, and we don't really talk about them. Now, they were fighting because Archduke Ferdinand, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, was assassinated by the Black Hand, a terrorist group, or rebels, that was supported and financed by Serbia, who wanted to destabilize the Austro-Hungarian Empire and win independence for the Balkan people who were subjugated by the Austrians. After that happened, Austria then presented Serbia with 13 demands that they had to follow. Otherwise, Austria would declare war, and Serbia was on board with 12 of them, except for the last demand, which was having Austrian officials and investigators be allowed to join the investigation and prosecution of the guilty parties involved in the assassination and have free reign in this country of Serbia. So eventually, the deadline passes, and Austria wasn't backing down. But Serbia was allied with Russia, who was said that they would have their back if anything happened, and Russia was allied with France. Meanwhile, of course, Austria was allied with Germany, of course, backing them up. Now, that's a rather simplified view of the whole conflict and why it started, but I'm not interested in lecturing about the intricacies of World War I politics. But it's very hard to say that either party is entirely in the wrong. I mean, Serbia obviously did have some culpability in the, assassination of the royal family of another country. And I don't think that asking for restitution of some kind is insane, but Austria also wasn't willing to budge at all and didn't do anything to de-escalate. And you could argue that they somewhat wanted a war to happen, or Germany did. That, of course, was the prevalent thought after the war ended. But of course, games about war don't always need a clear good guy. There are a couple of Civil War games who allow you to play as both sides, or games like the Total War series allow you to play as any empire. Like taking the Napoleon game, you can play as both sides of the conflict. Or even a game like Kingdom Come Deliverance, where you play as a quote-unquote knight fighting against Sigismund, and your lord support Winkelos. Now, I would imagine most players have no real opinion on the Hussite Wars or either party involved. If you do, please tell me your opinion on the Hussite Wars. I would love to talk about that. But it's still a great and beloved game, even though you're not exactly fighting for the moral side, nor do gamers really care if it was the moral side. But war games love it when you play as the clear, moral, good actor. I mean, look at all the COD games. You are the good guy saving the world, fighting terrorists or rogue actors, or all of unified South America for some reason. Every World War II game, you play as the Allies fighting against the evil Nazis, because it somewhat softens the insane amount of violence going on, because you can kind of compare it to a great crusade where you're smiting evil. So any amount of violence against the enemy is justified because they are evil. Again, games don't always need to have a clear moral side to be successful, but if you're going to have a setting where there is no clear good side, where there's shades of gray to the whole conflict, then the storytelling is going to have to be a bit more nuanced, which is obviously more challenging to write and obviously appeals to less people. Another reason that World War I is hard to gamify is I think that it's rather well known the known psychological toll that the war inflicted upon its participants. I mean, shell shock is one of the earliest diagnosed forms of PTSD, which came about from soldiers being bombarded every day in the trenches. This was also the first conflict with poisonous gas and shotguns and machine guns being widespread. It's pretty well known as a truly terrifying and haunting war. And games about war typically don't like to linger on the more terrifying aspects, the more war criminal aspects of combat, especially when both sides are doing it. Of course, some games do attempt to showcase the conflict while still making the game fun. I think the most well-known example is Battlefield 1, which a lot of people consider to be the last good Battlefield, and I'm one of those. I think Battlefield 1 does a great job at capturing the chaos and scale for a World War I battlefield. They have a lot of great period-accurate weapons, immaculate sound design, great set pieces to fight in. You see zeppelins and planes overhead, people are dying all around, you have terrible weapons to kill each other with, there's bayonets charging and horses on the battlefield, there's tanks. It does a great job of somewhat transporting you back there. But of course, they did have to temper a lot of the realism in the game. They had to simplify the trench system. I mean, at no point in the game are you sitting in a trench while artillery bears down, not allowing you to move. But I mean, obviously, it's not that type of game. But I think it also overemphasizes the heroism of World War I. I mean, when you play that game, campaign or multiplayer, you always feel like a badass. You feel like Adrian Carton de Wiart, who is known as the unkillable soldier in World War I, who got shot 27 times and still kept going back to the front. It does not do a good job of showing the actual horrors of World War I combat. I think the best thing for realism that Battlefield 1 does is the prologue Storm of Steel, where it allows you to play as multiple different soldiers in the battlefield in a variety of different situations, and when you die it shows the soldier's name and lifespan. And then as you die you're transported to another soldier on the battlefield to do it all over again. They also have a lot of great knowledge in there, as when you die it shows a little black screen with some text telling you about how terrible this war was and how it was all ultimately for nothing. I think this prologue does a great job of showing how cheap life was in World War I while still being a lot of fun. But of course, after that, the game really makes no attempt to show how terrible the conflict is. Which, again, I do understand it's just a video game. I'm not trying to be a chud over here. But I do wish that the game still continued to kind of somewhat show the horror of war. I mean, even the other campaigns in Battlefield 1 kind of have a, action-packed adventure feel to them for the most part. There's not really any moments of somberness other than the prologue. Another game that takes a different approach to World War I while still being fun is All Quiet in the Trenches, a squad management game about being a German sergeant in World War I, where you have to manage the morale and food supplies of your squad while facing the horrors and boredom of trench life. You have to manage your soldiers' time and fatigue level while still carrying out orders from superior officers. And then when you go into battle, it sucks because you know someone is probably going to die. You are going to have to do risky things, and you are probably just not going to have a good time. And when you die or someone else dies, the game treats it as a big deal. The soldiers will break down or have a severe psychological problems from seeing terrible things. They're going to be upset that their friend died. They're going to be upset at you that you didn't do anything to prevent it. And your superior officers do not care that just 1 or 2 soldiers died from your measly little squad. You are the bottom of the totem pole. I think the problem with a more grounded, realistic approach like this is that you're forsaking broad appeal for a much more realistic look at the war. You are not going to get some insane sales number and engagement when you compare it to a game like Battlefield 1 or Izanzo. I mean, if you want a game all about hard-pounding action, this is not it. The game wants you to reflect and really think about your actions. I mean, really imagine trying to create a game where the primary mechanic isn't victory or winning a battle or war, but survival. A game that rewards you not for heroism, but for enduring the unendurable. I think that's the challenge of World War I. You need to cater to cinematic action that gamers expect, while still trying to be realistic and respectful to the millions who died. Which, obviously, most World War I games just don't do. They don't attempt to tackle it all. I don't think any game developers really want to glorify war or make it seem cool, but that's obviously what happens when a bombastic action game like Battlefield 1 is made. Gamers come away from that game thinking, man, World War I was epic. They don't come away thinking, man, those people fought over nothing and died over nothing, and I'm still living from the fallout of that war. They just think, oh man, it's crazy when I got killed by that person on a camel. I mean, gamers often expect fast-paced, clear objectives and satisfying resolutions, which a war like the drawn-out, ambiguous nature of World War I does not satisfy. I mean, imagine playing a Battlefield or Call of Duty type campaign through the Western Front on World War I, and then, win or lose, no matter which side you fought for, you accomplish nothing, and then a little more than 20 years later, World War II starts, and the whole cycle repeats itself because of what World War I did. There is no satisfying conclusion to be found. There is no great resolution. Millions of people fought and died for nothing. There is no great moral issue or ethic to apply to the war, like slavery for the Civil War, or freedom for the Revolutionary War, or fighting the evil Nazis like World War II. There is just kings and queens fighting with each other for no reason. So what can developers learn from Battlefield 1 and All Quiet in the Trenches? I mean, it is even really possible to make a truly great World War I game while still being realistic. I don't know. I think it is possible, but if it's realistic, not a lot of people are going to be interested. I think great World War I games need to focus on the more personal stories of people trying to survive the war. I think games like Valiant Heart tackle it pretty well. I think movies like War Horse or 1917 or All Quiet on the Western Front, the new remake, or the original, do a great job of reminding us of an important truth. War isn't just about battles or being cool or playing little dark edits. It's about survival, humanity, and loss. I just think maybe the reason World War I is so hard to gamify isn't that we can't, but maybe that we shouldn't. I mean, really a terrible conflict. A lot of things about it really just do make me sad on a truly deep level. Like the Christmas truce. Really just even thinking about that makes me a little sad. I mean, to know that on Christmas, both sides came to their senses. Well, obviously the soldiers on the ground didn't care about the war's issues. And they had fun and drank with each other and played soccer and stopped killing each other for one night. Just for their commanding officers to command them to get back into a trench and kill each other the next day. I mean, those soldiers on that night understood the futility and stupidness of war. But unfortunately, it didn't mean anything, and they all died for no reason. So that's all I have. What a great note to end it on there. But that's all I got. Thank you for watching if you're sticking around. Sorry I missed last week's update, but, last week's video, but, it was Christmas, guys. Come on, it's Jesus' birthday. So that's all I got. That's been Conduit Gaming, and remember, Jesus loves you.